Hmm.
Yeah, so I'm just changing it. Oh, you see it?
Let's find out. Hmm. Really?
It should be up now.
There it is.
All right. So what were you saying now?
Good question.
You totally forgot, didn't you? You were saying something about
oh,
not knowing.
oh, it was about the deep freeze. Bugger. We know roughly what caused it, and some of the actual mechanisms that have caused it, but it's still a semi mystery as to how it's reached this point.
Mm, okay.
Like, for example, we do know that the the main contributor was volcanic activity somewhere around the Indies, so around Indonesia, the Philippines, and Indochina, like around that area.
Right.
Mainly because it has the biggest collections of volcanoes, which are still fairly active.
Very much so.
And whatever whatever happened there managed to escalate the actual production of the chemicals and gases, which contributed to the global cooling,
Mm-hmm.
and then eventually brought on what has occurred.
Yeah, you did your research, man. Did your research.
Hmm.
But yeah, you're right. You're right. I did. I think I made too many videos on this topic. Too many videos.
Hmm.
One of them has at least 1,000 views. The other one has, I have absolutely no idea how many. I
You've
can't.
forgotten.
Yes, I. Let me see if I can find it. It was one of them.
uh,
It has over 1,000. I think it has 3,000 views. I did a whole playlist of everything. Got all the stuff set up. I even. Did you know that I actually, when I play the game, I take shots of the Frostland. So like all the little
hmm.
areas in it, I go in and I record a bit and then I stop and then I save it, and that's how I get all these beautiful screenshots and stuff, and I just put them together.
Uh,
It's like this one, then check this out. See that?
I'll do it help if I actually open up Google.
And then I go right back. Let me see if I can find another one. I mean,
Uh,
you seeing it now?
oh yeah, 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 not bad.
Yeah, so I go through all those little stuff and then I take shots of the various cities I build and I make it look, all.
How did you get that one of the train station?
I found it in the Discord. So I just took it and I did a
That's rather interesting.
little editing and stuff. But I'm wondering, some well, looking back at what I know from the content I've been reading through, some of what we said about the
Why does that remind me of that one event in TLA?
which one that probably is.
The train station.
It probably is. But I'm wondering if the train station is linked to something because this, according to what the lore says, from what I got from the Discord, is it's a self-sustained city by itself, and I mean trains can exist in the Frostpunk lore. They do exist, but the thing is, as you can see with this system, is that it more than likely became abandoned after the deep freeze came on because there was no way for you to maintain such a long line of track in the Frostland without
The only way to the on yeah, and the only way to do it possibly is if the actual heating system required for the operations of the tracks were directly linked to the generator and also most likely had some sort of system, probably in the middle of the tunnels too, to ensure that there is no loss of heat.
And there's nobody in their right mind that is going to waste so much time to do something like that.
Oh, well, look, unless you get, 10 engineers, you make them completely drunk and you give them a pen and paper.
Maybe, maybe.
Maybe.
That's the thing.
Maybe.
Because everybody is like, I have to get home to my wife, my uncle, my mom, or whatever, and they just leave. Everybody leaves. And when
Mm.
they come back, there's nothing to come back to because it's covered with snow. So
Mm-hmm.
I highly doubt that they would ever have the time. But
Yeah, well, who knows?
who knows?
Uh,
But I think
mm,
11-bit Studios is trying, because the Rifts map before kind of gave us an idea of what the new DLC for this year would have been with the slave ship. It's just that we never knew that it was connected to TLA until late when they released the first pieces of content. And then the
that
map,
is true.
yeah, then they released the map the year before about the city. There was a map of a particular city, and I'm saying, so what they were doing, they were giving breadcrumbs, which I actually appreciated. I appreciated the fact that you were leaving small bits and pieces of content. But then after a while, you had this massive drought taking place where everything just got frozen again and they just maintained radio silence. And I was like, come on, guys, give us something to
Okay.
work with. You see what I mean? The fact that,
Yeah, I mean that's the same with any game, really.
yeah, they just go quiet for a while, and yeah, just like Warframe, and you have nothing to really work with. But then
Yeah,
these,
that is true.
yep, it is. And then
Mm.
they create content like this. And so I was looking, I was one of the guys that said, if you're gonna do an endless or something like a sandbox scenario, then it makes absolutely more sense for you to have some form of dynamic weather. They put in dynamic weather now. Then they decided, okay, we're gonna do the builders now, and the builders is gonna have you build a city, but it's not gonna be built from scratch. You're going to recycle some of the parts and then construct a generator. What you're seeing on the screen is hard labor in building a generator from the ground up with, I think, 200 and something sick people with none of them dying. That was horrible. And I don't think I'm going to do that again for
I
a
still
while.
remember my first game. I'm going, this is going to be fine. 15 days in. Why is everyone dead?
That's the thing. I mean, people die
Uh,
so quickly. You have no
when
idea what the.
when you think about it, I believe it was, I think, the natural freezing point without any proper insulation or anything from the weather was like negative 60 or 70.
Yeah, I think it's about that. That's
Something, it was something real low, and I can't remember its the actual number itself.
I think the lowest it can go is about 120 something.
I thought it was 100 and I thought it was like 180.
Nah, it depends. Maybe if you're playing, it depends on what you're playing, but yeah,
True.
it depends on the, yeah, cause if, yeah, if you go to the extreme, it can be that cold. But I'm thinking about it. If it goes to 180, everybody dies. So the coldest it could probably get is 120. If it's 180, that means it's probably gonna last for probably a day, because anything longer than a day and the entire city is dead. Because the generator is not built to sustain anything above 100. Did you know that?
Mm,
So if the temperature falls below 100 degrees, expect people to start losing limbs and dying. So
mm-hmm.
what I'm thinking, as a, so this is something I also thought about when I was doing research on the deep freeze. I noticed that the deep freeze followed a line of history. I think
Hmm.
the snowstorm of 1804. Do you remember that?
I remember it vaguely. Yes.
Because that's that snowstorm of 80 snow hurricane, excuse me. The snow hurricane was the first, it was the first tropical cyclone recorded in history known to produce snowfall. So a tropical cyclone, what do these,
Oh, the one that hit Massachusetts.
yes. So if we look at a tropical cyclone, it's almost like a hurricane. It's basically it's a hurricane in a sense. So this thing existed within our timeline, but the difference is the way how it was able to continuously manifest. So my thinking process is that somehow this snow hurricane managed to get enough momentum that it would form every couple of months or maybe every year or so, and it would form in different areas. And so, because of this,
It would most likely. Oh, sorry to interrupt, but it would
no,
most
that's all
likely
right.
start gradually because,
There we
and this is
go.
something I learned from a lot of my mates who are fireys,
Mm-hmm.
and the thing is about Australian bushfires is that once they reach a certain point,
Mm-hmm.
there is no point trying to stop them
Ah,
because what ends up happening is no matter how much water or fire retardant you throw into the fire, it's not actually going to slow it down because what ends up happening is that it melts the water instantaneously. It destroys the fire retardant without a question in mind, but it also violently sucks in the air and anything in its surroundings. And this is a fairly common thing that happens with even basically any storms. Once they reach a certain like the tipping, they basically turn into giant vacuum cleaners and will just suck in everything to the point so that way they're self-sufficient
ah,
until they run out of material,
all
which is
right.
what usually happens with the bushfires is they wait for them to run out of. But
And
the problem is that the material for the storm is the cold and it's the wind,
and that never runs out.
and that never runs out. But there most likely will be a point.
Where it has to die
The
down.
problem, yeah, the problem is trying to figure out where that point is and how long have these winds been going on for, and how long have the storms been going on for.
Well, if you check the New London story, it says that they were traveling for months, and if you
Mm.
if you can find a way to calculate how long it takes to go up north, if you're driving a land dreadnought or some form of vehicle and you're walking, then it'll give you a kind of timestamp as to when it actually took place.
Remember, remember someone saying, can't remember where, but I think it was that the land dreadnoughts go about 15 or 20 kilometers an hour,
Mm-hmm.
so they're fairly slow.
Right. So then if you,
Um,
well that,
but going off that number,
well, is that
yeah,
when
it'd be months.
that the question though is that speed related to when the tower is erect, or is it the speed when the tower isn't erect?
True.
Because I think if it's traveling that slow, that means the tower is up. But if the tower isn't up,
Mm,
it's supposed to be able to move real fast. Because at the end of Winterhome, that thing was hightailing it out of there.
mm.
So I think because it was surrounded by people, it took months. Probably, I'll give it at least. Let's say the game took place. The game takes place in 1886. So that means they probably would have been traveling for 6 months or so,
At least.
at least, to get to the site. So my thinking is that before they got to the site, the storm the storms had already started to manifest, but it was in the form of small storms that would last for at least 2 to 3 days.
Yeah, like the blizzards.
Right. And then after, when they came there, it had subsided, for like it has a season. And then when they started to develop the site and upgrade the generator tower, that's when the storm started to gain momentum and come back around. So I'm thinking that when the temperature starts to go from 30 to 40 to 50 to 60, that's when the storm is actually starting to approach the city. And so that, in a sense, is how the cycle works. So everything goes back to at least -20, and then the storm passes through, and then it comes back around and it does the same thing again. And the additional information we got from the Endless is that the storm removes and deposits snow. Do you remember that?
Which is which normally happens with normal snowstorms, except not in the manner that Frostpunk's talking about. Because I'm fairly certain they're talking about at least a couple of meters.
Hurricane type winds depositing snow
Hmm.
and removing it. And so, because the snow is continuously being removed and then replaced, anything that was probably underneath gets covered over again. So, if there's a land dreadnought,
True.
yeah, it gets covered. And so, I'm thinking now that what might have happened is that when the deep freeze started to take hold after years of volcanic eruption, and we discussed that already as to how it covered the atmosphere, and it caused a short global cooling that eventually led to the ice sheets reflecting more sunlight. And then the storms took advantage of that coldness, and then you had a freakish weather condition that became normal. And
Mm.
then that weather conditions,
It's more of the rapid growth and the rapid acceleration of the ice shelves in terms of growth,
yes.
because they also correlate to the overall global temperature.
Ah.
Because the larger the ice shelves are, the cooler the water is,
Mhm.
which then correlates to the global temperature.
So I think we've also found something else that also connects to it, which would be
It also happens in real life because currently the ice shelves are melting, which is then contributing to a warmer ocean, warmer
mhm,
weather.
yes. And the warmer it gets, is the colder the ocean gets, because all of that ice is going directly into it. And who
Mm.
knows what kind of stuff that's gonna cause. But
Apart from Florida flooding when all the ice caps melt.
and
No
then
more Florida, man.
there's gonna be no more real estate down there.
Woo!
That's the problem. You see, just a small change in degrees or Celsius, degrees Celsius, Fahrenheit, whatever it is that makes people comfortable, it can
Mm.
affect the entire balance of the planet. And these guys must have learned this too late, because if Lord Craven was just testing out this building of generator sites, and you had to complete it just in case, that says something to me. That tells me that they were not planning on using the generator towers as a source of survival if the worst came to pass. They never thought it would actually become the norm. And so many
Mm.
people got frozen. Many people went back home, you know? And
Mm.
I find that a bit intriguing as well. The mere fact that people never really put much emphasis. When you played TLA, did you get the impression that your project was not necessarily going to be the end all?
I hmm. I had the feeling that it was more of a oh shit moment, considering the fact that they were basically strict deadlines, and if you didn't meet it, you're getting replaced, and the project will continue.
Mhm.
I was more under the impression that they did know what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
They refused to believe that it was even the most remotest of possibilities that it would occur. And when you start having massive, like en masse crop failures,
Mm-hmm.
you have famines that are breaking out. The All of a sudden you're getting longer winters, and things aren't all of a sudden working out, and everyone's going, "What the hell's going on?" Believe that's when they've started to go, "Okay, well, what's going on?" And then they find out, things aren't great, and to prevent a global panic, which would then become out of control once the public found out, was they began to construct the generators.
Yeah.
Except, they didn't have any quality control, nor did they have any real understanding on where would be the best place and when should we get this completed. So it was basically get this done by this date and let us know.
Yes.
And I'm believing TLA was nearing the end of that when the public is starting to find out where there is massive amounts of unrest because most likely someone in the political spheres leaked it. And normally how the public works is basically it's like Chinese whispers except on steroids.
Yes. Once them bitches found out, they all went crazy and started killing each other.
And because you have the telegram, which
Ah.
is now, I have to get my history right, I believe they've just connected North America to Europe. So
Mm-hmm.
now you have it going there, and you have everyone just panicking. And not only on top of that, you have mass migrations to the southern hemisphere. So now those countries are now under enormous strains.
Mm-hmm.
So then you start seeing migrations going all over the place, trying to find somewhere to stay that is, remotely possible of living.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have no idea what the other nations did.
Well, it's like
Which
it's likely if the storm
it's
is.
likely they copied, but we don't know what we know. The French had some sort of railway network
Yeah.
in the area where TLA is, and where the other two sites we find, and a nod to Winterhome,
Well,
but
not
we don't really know where that is,
where winter room is or TLA.
where we're actually meant to be looking,
Winter home. So where?
because we do know it's in between the Quebec side of Canada and Greenland, so along that channel. But then if they were traveling for months, then that would mean they would have to be traveling for at least close to a year to get to New London, which
Hmm.
means you would have to include the southern tip of Greenland and possibly a bit of the west in order to compensate for that.
And I think that is the
It's
likely
workable.
area. I think that is the likely area as to where it would have
Mm,
been because in the very early stages of getting into Frostpunk, the player is greeted with the evacuation order being given. And so land dreadnoughts were leaving. As a matter of fact, the land dreadnought that you see in the first part of the this Frostpunk story is the last land dreadnought that left England or
mm.
London. That was the last one. So that means others had already made the treacherous journey. And the thing about it,
Which then,
go on. What do you say?
yeah, which then means where are the others?
Ha. Well, some of them went to Winterhome. Two went to Winterhome. Two went to two were in the area of the the arcs, and I think maybe two more went to the area where the refugees are. One of
Mm,
the land dreadnoughts for the winter home was It basically had some malfunctions, and so they just abandoned it and they buried some of the people that might have got harmed. I don't remember the full story as to that. Did that a long time ago.
Well, didn't they, if I remember correctly, didn't they say that it blew up? Like it had something happened with the actual core and it blew up.
Yes, something like that. And they had to bury some of the people. And then after that, the next thing that happened is that they basically retrofitted that land dreadnought that you see in Winterhome. That's not how a land dreadnought's supposed to work. It's not supposed to carry 600 people. It's only supposed
Normally.
right. It's supposed to have a coach behind it that it pulls, and you find a coach in Winterhome as well. So it pulls that coach behind it with people, and the front section just stores probably the captain and some engineers and some basic workers to stock it with coal and so forth. However, you see, because of the whole situation of them having to get out of there so fast, they just retrofitted everything and changed it up. So that thing was basically a colony ship. That's what it
Hmm.
was. So you're looking at a colony ship that's traveling across the Frostland, taking people to God knows where. And this thing needs at least 1,000 coal to keep moving or more. Well, we're not sure as to if it's fuel efficient because nobody has any idea. But we do know that
And
this
we
the
don't even know what, one coal means. We're talking about 1 kilo of coal, 1 ton, 1 pound.
there we go.
Uh,
So we have no idea. But what we do
mm.
know is that it is capable of traveling very far distances, storing lots of materials, food, and this one can carry at least 800 people or so. But the thing is,
Mm.
the other interesting thing about the land dreadnoughts is that these machines can also be disassembled and turned into the cities themselves. That was 11-bit Studios' initial plan. But the thing is, the problem with that is that for generators to work, they have to be below the freezing line. So what's likely that people would have done is that the land dreadnought would be kept as a backup plan, if you see what I'm saying. So these vehicles are escape vehicles. You don't destroy them. You keep them just in case the worst comes and you need to get out of the city as quickly as possible. And so what
Mm.
people would do is that a land dreadnought would be waiting outside of the city. If it's not stuck in some snow or fall into some ice crevice, that vehicle would then be used as a means to escape. And that was the procedure um, throughout. That was the basic procedure. Because if you check the lore for New London, you know that there was a bridge and there was an automaton maintaining that bridge,
Mm-hmm.
and there was a weather station. Then there was the city of New London, Winterhome, that was destroyed. Then there was New London to the north, far northeast, northeast, or so. And then above that was the Tesla City, and directly below Winterhome, and either directly below or above, we have the Ark City. So within that same region, the Ark City is nearby. Because if you notice, the storm hits right after the. If you check Winterhome, not Winterhome, New London, when the storm hits, it's almost the same. It's almost the same in the arcs. If you have you ever seen it that the storm is actually on your doorstep when you're building the city? So
Mm.
I'm thinking that those two areas are very close. So then either the arcs is above New London or below in that region. And if the arcs is above, then TLA is below. And if TLA is below, probably to the east, because we know that people would be coming from Europe and they wouldn't be coming from the Pacific side, because that's probably Russian territory or so. So they'd be coming from the east going west. That's the only way that's the only way that the ships would get through with the icebreakers on the front of it. So then that then therefore means that TLA is to the east of Winterhome. and there you kind of have an idea of where it could be. So it's probably in the inlets to the east, and then they went up. The train took them some distance. And come to think of it, do you actually think that the vehicle that was carrying the resources to Winterhome, do you think it was a trade? Because I don't think it was a trade.
No, because the vehicle they were using looked awfully similar to the actual vehicle they used for the winter home evacuation.
Right. So I'm thinking that
It might be it might be the same vehicle.
that's what I think. And that vehicle does not have a name as yet. Nobody has named it, but I'm going to call it the escape vehicle or um uh, mini.
Jerry.
Yes, something like that. Because if you check it, that vehicle never made it to Winterhome. So even if you gave them the parts, they never made it there because by the time
Unless it did,
it didn't. Because remember,
okay, because if it did and dropped off the parts and probably in the unrest that occurred, because most of the town was burnt.
yes,
Well, most of the city was completely just it was burnt. It might be possible that all the parts, all the plans, all the basic everything that could possibly be needed for the repair, maintenance, and the rebuilding of certain parts was lost.
yes, that's likely if they had made it. But then the next piece of the content that kind of throws a wrench in that vehicle ever making it there. If those guys were fighting, then the generator itself would have gone out before they made it there, which means that those individuals were likely picked up by the New Londoners. You remember that large convoy that you came upon when you were playing New London for the first Make a New Home for the first time?
Yes.
I think that
How did I forget that?
I think that explains it.
I think it does.
Those guys never made it there. They weren't
No.
they weren't supposed to make it there because the beacon needs the generator to function. So if the generator goes down, they ain't gonna be able to get there. And so that city was doomed from the very beginning. They just hastily patched it back up together so that they wouldn't freeze to death. So
Mm.
right after that failed, the automaton that was working on the bridge, either it was called back by the city, or what's likely to have happened is that they left it there so that they could get across. Then the research station was in the midst of actually re-establishing contact with um, with the New London site that was more than likely abandoned because of the fact that those guys, if you yeah, remember the contract for building generators, how it works. You build a site, and then when the site is done, you go home. So
Mm.
if that's the rule, then that means that the engineers that were working there left the site once they were finished, expecting Winterhome to handle the logistics. Then the guy called
Because Winterhome was originally a military-based outpost,
right, and it was supposed to serve as like a logistics area.
and in saying that, most likely is that you've got Winterhome.
Uh-huh.
Then you've also got. They would have most likely. There is no mention of Tesla City in Winterhome. Sorry, in Winterhome.
No, there was.
So most likely is that the furthest they got was So you've got I'm writing this down. Then you also New London. It's almost like it's in a semi straight line in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a look at the way they're shaped, but the location for having Winterhome as an actual logistics outpost doesn't really make any sense. I mean, when you think about it, it's right next to a massive ravine. It's in between two mountains and a pass. kind of make more of a an outreaching outpost in a sense,
Eh, yes, that
or it was originally designed to protect the new London site without them knowing.
I think in a sense it was. Oh, I get it now. It was actually it was a military base, a military outpost that was eventually turned into almost like a military city that eventually became a logistics center. The reason why I say it's a logistics area is because of the way it was built, or the way that they built the generator site. If you notice that all the other sites are built into a hole except Winterhome.
Yes,
So what I think it is that they chose that site because it would allow them easy access to haul in large amounts of resources and then distribute them wherever else they needed to, which is why the escape vehicle was easily able to be integrated into the city. So
because
that
it would have been normally used for the hauling of materials.
right. And so, because you're a military outpost that will eventually become the whatever it is, the beacon of hope to kind of set the way for new travelers coming, because that's what their job was. Their job was to guide people to the new site, which would be New London. It would make a lot of sense for them to have a holding area for people so they could process them quickly. But if you're down in a hole, it's much harder to ferry people up and out.
True.
Because, I mean, as much as it looks easy when you see the scouts leaving and the hunters leaving and coming back in, it's not as easy as it seems, because there's a waiting time for those resources and the people to go up into the outposts and come back down from the outposts. And it makes much more sense if you have some form of flat area that you can easily pull people out of if there's a disaster like the generator just goes dark. You can easily say, all right, let's get to the land dreadnought, and you just call in the escape vehicle and they leave. I think that vehicle is some form of advanced crawler. Some form of advanced crawler. 'Cause crawlers are what people travel around in the Frostland on. Like the speed bikes that you
Mm.
see in Star Wars, similar to that. They're very common, and people, yeah, people use them.
That or on foot.
Yes, on foot. So I'm thinking
But
if
I've got a feeling they would most likely be using the sleds that you normally use,
I think yes, yes and
the
no.
husky sleds.
Yes and no. Yes, yes for small groups like five or so, I believe that they would use
Mm.
the sleds. But like larger groups would use a crawler because it's able to travel much faster. It uses one steam core, a little coal, some steel, and you're on your way. So that's how I see them going about transportation in the Frostland. So Winterhome was deliberately set up in that area because the rock itself kind of protects it from the cold a bit, and the site was constructed before the deep freeze, just like TLA, before the deep freeze actually took hold of the area. So they had the advantage of already being settled into that site. And then they said, okay, well, we don't necessarily need to have the weather station internally, so let's build it on the outskirts, which, was a terrible idea. So having that on the outskirts of the city now, kind of,
Wasn't there like a telephone line based from the weather station to the actual city itself?
I think there probably was like an some form of line, like as you say, what do you call it again? The my brain, the what Morse code or whatever they call it, telegram.
Uh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
They
Telegraph line.
Yeah, they probably had that. But the thing is, you can't have the engineers outside of the city monitoring it, monitoring the weather for too long, because if this storm comes, they're going to freeze out there. And if there's an emergency, by the time the message gets to them, everybody has evacuated. So they're stuck in that area. Wait a second.
Mm.
And so, what I think, what I think is likely to have actually happened is that the new captain called them back to help with the fixing of the generator. And you're back? I'm gonna call him back. Hold on. Hey, what's going on? Okay, I'm gonna have to cut. You're back?
You dropped out.
Oh, I dropped out. Okay, oops, sorry. Um, so what I was
Stream.
saying,
Oh no, stream's back up.
the stream, yeah, stream, yeah, it is, it is, it is. It actually never went down. So what I was saying is that when they realized that there was no way to save the tower itself, they left the site, and anybody that was left behind was basically killed in the blast or froze to death. Because when generators explode, they take everything with them. The power,
Mm.
anything that's operating, automatons. If you're in the area,
Not even that. Most of the city is made out of wood.
yep,
And given the fact that the generator itself has to at least be running at, probably at least 500 degrees.
everything is gonna burn up.
Yeah, because it's the basically the heart of the fire.
Yes.
Is not only that, because of the way the wind is and the temperature and all that. Because normally cold air goes up and hot air stays below.
No, it's hot air
Well, unless
goes
it's the other way around,
hot
and
air
I've gotten it
goes up.
wrong.
Yeah, hot air goes up and cold air stays below.
That's it. I've gotten myself confused.
so that so that
It is.
gone.
Yeah, most likely. Yeah, everything around would have just been sucked into the fire once it reaches, its terminal point,
Yes.
which is probably, where we get the photo, the snippet at the end, where
Hmm.
you can just see when I'm in just a blaze of fire.
And anything and everything that was in there is barbecue.
Beyond barbecued, non-existent.
Yep. So that site is basically gone. Finito. But the good thing is that you can get wood
Yeah,
from it. You can still get wood
usable wood, yes.
that you can use to sustain your new new home city. Basically, taking wood that's probably smeared with dead people to prop up your city. And nothing wrong with that.
Hmm.
Nothing is
Yeah,
wrong with
nothing, nothing wrong.
that. And I found that very intriguing that they actually left without leaving a note. But I mean, if you're leaving in a hurry, you ain't gonna tell nobody you're going anywhere. And by the time those,
Well, there was a belief that no one else was there,
yeah, there was. So those guys,
and
go on.
oh yeah, and they probably believed, when the scientists said, "Oh, by the way, we're seeing smoke on the other side of, that ravine."
Hmm.
They most likely wanted the belief of, we'll send those guys out and we'll find something out,
Yeah, but they,
and in the meantime, we'll try to go around and meet up with them. That most likely never happened, and they probably got killed in the frost.
the scouts that went looking for the city.
No, the actual land dreadnought. Everyone on board most likely died when the Great Frost occurred.
You sure about that?
Possibly.
I think they
It's always a
went.
possibility.
I think they went.
Um, unless they found somewhere.
I think they probably found somewhere because they went
Mm.
the land dreadnought was north I think it was east of the city. So it's likely that they left the area. And if they had left the area before the storm actually took set in that region, it's likely that they probably went somewhere farther down. Somewhere either I'm not sure.
The land dreadnought was south, and they travelled in a south by southeasterly direction, having a look at, rough things.
Hmm.
So most likely, because what was it? It's around day 30 that the storm starts to pick up.
It starts to get colder by day 30. Wait a
Yeah, so they've got about a 1 month lead.
yeah, but wait a second. You said something that's kind of interesting, or something that kind of connects up. If the storm started at day 30 for them, and the site they
Yeah, for New London, it starts around day 30.
oh, okay, okay, yeah, 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 yeah. So they would have left long before that, probably about
And they mention about them seeing smoke, which would most likely be on day 1 or day 2
oh,
of when New London is founded.
right. So then that then therefore means that the captain of that land dreadnought hightailed it out of there and probably made it somewhere that was a bit.
And it is mentioned that they are trying to find a way of getting the people from Winterholme to New London. The problem is that the way to get through there wasn't capable for land dreadnought, so we have to recalculate the route.
Hmm, hmm.
And who knows where they are now?
Eh?
They're either dead or still trying to get their way.
Or probably they went south and ended up somewhere else.
Mm,
Terrorists, some other people. Or nah, they couldn't be the people that founded New Manchester. Nah, nah, I don't
because
think.
there's no mention of a dreadnought for New Manchester.
Yeah, there isn't. Unless they turn the dreadnought into a generator tow. But that's unlikely.
Unless they basically disassemble the generator and then slapped it on the ground,
Probably not though. Highly unlikely.
and then use whatever materials to build their city.
I think they saved those bastards for the new conquest
They
DLC.
most likely would have.
Because I mean that story it make absolutely no sense for those people to escape and then you get them killed. That makes absolutely no sense. But it's likely that they are somewhere within the Frostland, um, going south, or it's probably almost like one of those mini games where you are in a vehicle that's running from the storm, and so they probably settle somewhere, and then when they get comfortable and it gets too cold, somebody says, "Hey, there's a storm coming," and then they all pack up and keep moving, like what
Just
everybody.
keep running, bro.
Yeah, that's because I mean that's what everybody else does because people keep
Basically,
yeah, because remember when winter home when the storm started to pick up, there were refugees that were coming from somewhere in the frostland to the city. They were coming from the east of New London, and they were making their way into the city, and they were sick. A lot of them were sick. You remember that?
wasn't it the very beginning?
No, that was nearing to the end when the storm was coming.
Yeah, and oh yeah, and there's this onslaught of just refugees,
Yes.
and I didn't pick them all up, so I didn't pick up every little bit of
And
information about them. Sadly,
so it seems that they
um, so
it's
most likely whoever was leading that group, because wasn't it a scientist or something
I know it was just
that
a
was
it was just a
leading? I can't
no, it was just a
remember.
collection of random people coming. So it's like they were coming from the shore, and they were whatever site it is that they were living in had
Which
failed.
was most likely near Tesla City, but it states most people that were residents of Tesla City were dead.
Well, a large percentage of them died. Some of them were
Hmm.
banished into a camp, and they were rescued by the New London Scouts. But those people that you see coming in from the east, they aren't with the groups that were. So some of the scientists that were working in the okay. So here's how the layout of the Frostland for that era is. Winterhome, Center of Logistical Support, Development, New London, second constructed city to represent the New World or the re-establishment of civilization. Tesla City, America's version of capturing technology and manufacturing it for profit. And then you had the science teams that were working along with everybody in the Frostland trying to figure out what was causing it. And that's where you get the Nansen papers and you get the story about Fridtjof Nansen who was trying to figure out what caused the deep freeze, and he ended up getting killed by the deep freeze itself. But the papers he left behind told us that the storm comes for a certain amount of time and then it goes away and then it comes back again. And then during that process, some of the scientists were in the process of making a new site for a city. So you remember that you found this huge crater in
Yes.
what those craters are is people say that it was some meteor that came to Earth, but that's not what it was. Those areas are how cities are started. So what happens is that if it's a case where the Frostland has already taken over, what they will do is they will excavate a large hole, and then if they have enough resources, they will then start to dig below the freezing line as fast as they can, and then they will start to build and construct the generator in that area. And then by the time the regular people get to the site, you won't see any of the equipment. Or like when you look at the cities or the image that you can see. Let me see if I can bring it back up on my screen with this city, how nothing can be built directly in front of the generator. That's because that area hasn't been tiled over, if you understand what I'm saying. So they
Mm.
they put some stones and so forth over that area to cover the raw infrastructure, and then you can build housing closer to the generator itself. So that's why when you play regular endless, the area in which you can construct is much um, closer to the generator itself, versus when you're building it in the builders, it's much further out, because in a sense the area outside of has not actually been fully stabilized. And so if you build anything in that area, it may collapse inwards and compromise the infrastructure. So everything is built outside of the crater. So what you're seeing around the generator is a large crater. That's how big the crater is that the generator is sitting inside of. And
Mm.
all of that keeps the heat going and pumps the carbon dioxide somewhere out on the outskirts of the city, because that carbon dioxide cannot come out the same stack where the steam comes out of. If that was the case, everybody in that area would be dead. Here's another interesting thing that you probably know.
You've also forgot to mention something about the craters. Is that a lot of them for the maps is that yes, around the generator,
Yeah.
it's a straight down hole to a certain point, most likely for whatever that the generator needs, probably some sort of gas,
Mhm.
which is mentioned in builders and TLA. But a lot of the outside walls is ice.
You're talking about for the city itself.
Hmm.
Yeah, 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 yeah. That's true. The entire area was a forest, and then it eventually became covered with ice because of the frostland. So,
Not only that, because of the generator, like it's mentioned, it's left on idle. So you've got ice buildup, and once ice reaches a certain temperature, well, it begins to liquefy. Then it
yeah.
can also snap freeze,
Did you say snap
which is
freeze?
snap freeze or rapid freezing,
Yes. Yes, 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 yes.
which is then where you get all these wonky looking walls, and you just go, how on earth does that work?
Uh-huh.
Which is then most likely explain why the giant hanging rock over Winterhome, hasn't come tumbling down, or
Eh, yeah, you're onto
when it
that.
will.
When it will. When
Because
when
if you have a look at it, is that a lot of the internal cracks have actually got snow, or not, they've got ice in it,
yeah.
and what eventually happens is that once that begins to freeze, it then begins to slowly erode the rock.
Yes, that's true. I think we're talking about that because the ice pushes the rock apart.
Hmm.
So
Once it begins to form, then it begins to rip apart the rock.
So, and then you showed me an image of where the soil becomes soil. Then you have underneath the soil there's ice, and then underneath that you have soil again. I think we did have a discussion
Oh
about
yeah,
that.
yeah, that one. Yeah,
So,
that was. That was gonna take a while to get dig back through.
so I mean,
Uh,
coming to thinking about it now, going going back into the whole idea of they leave the generator on idle, so that if it's left on idle, the amount of resources that if it's left on idle, there has to be a a team that would be maintaining the site. So probably a skeleton crew that probably lives around the site, and then after a while, if things get too difficult, they might flee the site itself. Because I think the guys that built New London ended up fleeing, I think, when the storm started to pick up, or they might have experienced a storm. Because if you notice, all of the machinery surrounding the city, or even the outpost, is destroyed.
mm,
So that means that some form of disaster took place, but it didn't affect the generator because the generator was in a hole already. And you do know that because hot air rises, there is a form of, I don't know if this even makes sense. There might be an atmosphere that develops in the crater that keeps the cold air from really
a
getting
natural
down.
heat level.
Right. And so that is also very innovative, figuring out a way to actually use the Earth's natural elements as a means to keep a particular area warm enough. Yes,
Mm.
that image. Thawed soil, coldest ice rich soil, and needle ice right underneath. That's exactly what the landscape of the Frostland looks like. I mean, even the areas around the generator itself, the walls of the city that protect it from, let's say, the cold, looks like that. And you
Mm.
do also know that it's impossible to build on the surface. Nothing can be built on the surface of the Frostland.
The winds are too strong, and there's
Yes,
no proper grounding because there's
yes.
just it's not strong enough.
So a
But
lot.
going back to what you said about the outposts, is a lot of them look like that. The generator, because by the time you get to it, it's been switched off and there's just snow everywhere.
Yep.
So most likely, it's been abandoned for probably about a month or two.
Yeah.
And when you account for the fact that by the time they've left, so the generators most likely ran out of its coal, which is left for idling, which would have been a lot, considering the fact that when something like that's been left on idle, is that the fire is not that strong. It's strong enough to keep, to keep the surrounding areas from not being completely swamped over, but not, yeah, just around that point. So most likely the winds, and because of the lack of maintenance, the winds got violent. Or
Uh-huh.
due to how violent the winds are, that the structures begin to just, you know, sway here and there, and oh, look, there goes a bit of that. Oh, and there goes the building.
Right. So and then and after
Possibly.
possibly, I mean that's pretty close. That I think that's it. I think that's basically it because the
Mm,
buildings themselves won't last long if there's nobody to maintain
maintain them.
maintain. Right.
And because it's the coal, and the coal does some pretty naughty things to metal,
Yeah.
um, because heat causes metal to expand, cold causes metal to shrink.
Right.
It's similar with a lot of materials.
And
Is that what most likely happened is the metal themselves, they shrink to a point, but what was it? I think they could only stay to that point for so long
before
without proper care and maintenance, and then
they snap.
it starts to cause problems, especially when you're talking about the very violent winds.
Huh?
And all you need is a few things happen here and there, and next thing you know, it's gone.
Ah, there we go. There we go. And I mean that's basically how I see it. That's how I see it happening in terms of you basically lose the infrastructure, everything goes down, everything goes to hell, and anybody that comes there probably thinks that the people died. But I think it's likely that a lot of them died maintaining the sites until people came. That's what I think. They ran out of food and they said I have to keep going, and then eventually the skeleton crew either they went home, tried to go home and died, or got eaten by animals in the frostland.
Mm.
That's how I see it.
That or they had a certain time for how long they had to stay, and they were getting closer to that point and going, well, no one's here. Well, there's no point in us staying.
Right. And you're on a contract and you have a wife at home, and then the city
Well, at
it's
least you still hope you have a wife.
yes. Oh yes,
But then again, they wouldn't know because there's no real way of contacting the outside world.
very much so. So you're basically closed off. And then
Mm.
there are some other intriguing situations. Like the largest map in the what do you call it now? You remember that flats? You remember flats?
Yes, I remember flats.
The story of flats is that the people, I think this is probably the story for all of the builder scenarios. They realized that the engineering team that was sent, I guess they were sent with their they were sent to build the site. Then they kept the site hidden from the government. You know, people are messed up like that. And then when they realized that they were coming back to a crumbling civilization, they grabbed their families and they probably took one of those escape vehicles and came back to the city that they were building.
Mm.
But they left all the machinery on overdrive and it exploded. And so they had to rebuild the generator itself.
As you do.
Yeah. And then when the site is built now, they moved in. So they basically scammed the government in order to save themselves. And they took at least 100 people, 100 and something people, men, women, and some children. And then after that, they basically worked on the site for as long as they could, got it up and running. And then some other villages or small civilizations must have started to set up around them. And then when everything started to get a bit more stable, they took on more people. And so because of that now, you end up with a new civilization developing out of it. And this, I think it's on the screen, is one of those civilizations I created.
Mm.
So all of these things come together. But I think if you have so much raw material that you can use to build new generator sites, it would make more sense for them to just use those same materials to create land dreadnought. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it would.
Because I mean, it would save you so much in terms of asset development and finding new resources. You could just repurpose some of these resources, and maybe you'd only have to add in steam cores, which you could probably
Mm.
find in the
And the thing
Frostpunk.
is that uni is that I'm basically doing a diploma in animation, so uh,
Well, maybe you'd be better
the
able
best thing
to.
you could reuse them if you wanted to actually build a new dreadnought. Then the question is, what would the purpose be?
Hmm. If you build it, what I was thinking, well, this is just my thought
Mm.
process. There's a
Go for it.
game that they have out named Anno 1800. Heard of it, right?
Ah, yeah, yes, yes, yes.
And I'm thinking if Frostpunk was to ever did the exploration thing like what Anno 1800 did, no one would be able to touch them because just by
Mm.
I mean just the whole idea that you could send a land dreadnought out to see if there are other people in the Frostland, you being able to do that as a mechanic, and you could get rare resources and probably find out other stories by visiting these new regions. I mean, that alone would make people want to keep playing. What do you think about that though?
It would definitely be interesting. That's for sure.
You see any
Then
problem?
we'd have to put a little bit more, time and effort into it, and actually give it a little bit more meat.
Like,
Well, there'd have to be a way so that way it's not just continuous. You could possibly use the same maps over and over and over again, but then you also have to create a way of doing procedurally generated cities, that aren't just copy and paste, which is a bit of a challenge. Then you've
okay.
also got to, the map would have to be expanded upon, depending on how large they made it.
Mm-hmm.
You would have to, yeah, you could get it to work. It'd be a bit interesting, but you could get it to work.
I'm
I could definitely see it working. Just need to iron out a few things here and there. That's
because
all.
I was saying I was also looking at it. I'm saying if you want to keep people playing as well, it would make a lot of sense to actually create. I think Warframe does this as well. This would be very innovative for a city survival. Um, Instead of you can find new technologies by searching through, let's see, wreckage of items. So, for example, you just decide that you're gonna go out into the Frostland after you've completed your city. You find the relics as an achievement, and then in doing so, you find blueprints to build a land dreadnought, and you collect all those blueprints, and then you get a quest that says, "Hey, Captain, we have found all the blueprints to construct one of the greatest machines ever created by humankind." And then you build this land dreadnought, and you send it out into the. You now have this vehicle that you can either use to set up another city in the same region, like it can help you carry resources there, or you can use it to explore another region.
Mm.
And I was also thinking, here's another crazy concept I had. You know that escape vehicle?
Yes.
I was thinking that that escape vehicle you could build probably two of them as a resource, and then as a transportation vehicle. One of them would be used to like ferry resources between cities, or well, you have the outpost team, so you wouldn't need to do that. But it could be used as a means to transport bulk resources to the land dreadnought, and once those resources have been transferred to it, you could build another vehicle and have that vehicle stored on the land dreadnought. And I'll soon tell you why. So right,
Mm.
so in the process of you stocking the after you build the land dreadnought, you then have to it would probably be close by the city, and you'd have to provide it with a garage. So you have to have a garage to keep it in so the coal doesn't destroy, or you have to provide it with coal, enough coal so that the storm won't freeze it over or cover it over. And then after that, now when the storm has subsided, you hurry up and send people into the vehicle. So maybe you could have like, I don't know, for for sake, you could probably like have 400 people in there, or it can take at least 600 people, and you could put like 200 in there, and you can either use it when you build it. You can put an escape vehicle on it, and then you send it to another region. And when you go into that other region now, um, you know, based on their resources and the time, a map could be used, like a global map, and it would show you where the land dreadnought can go, or it could say, based on what we know from the Victorian land dreadnoughts, these are the areas that we can explore, and then you send the vehicle in that direction, and then it disappears off your map. Like you see the vehicle going off the map, it disappears, and then the storm passes for you, and then after the storm passes, you receive a message back, and then it opens up a new region. You go to that new region, and I don't know, the captain might have a son or something, and he represents the captain in that region, and you can send the escape vehicle out with scouts in it to go and search areas and pick up people if needs be, and establish a trade route. This is crazy, of resources that you might need to keep the land dreadnought going. And if you don't find anything, you just find a new region, you can then come back and then you can retrofit the vehicle to go back again and probably set up a city. How about that?
Would be interesting.
That's a lot, though. That's a lot to do.
Well, it means that they could add in a function even just for standard endurance of a randomly generated city landscape.
Yeah, that evolves based on where you go. Like I think, have you ever played Total War Attila?
No, but I've played Shogun too, and Napoleon and Empire, and
Well,
when to get the Warhammer ones.
in Total War Attila, when you go to a when you're fighting, if it's in a desert region, the map is procedurally generated to be a desert, and if it's in a wherever you are, the map will generate items that will sit in. So if you're fighting in a hilly terrain, then you'll be on a mountain. If you're in a desert, you'll appear in a desert, stuff like that. If you're crossing,
That's basically with every single one of them, because like it's just you could normally what they've got is they have a collection, usually about 100 or so pre-made maps, but a lot of them are they're made on the spot.
yeah,
Like especially for campaign, the campaign ones are made up on the spot depending on where you are and where things are.
that's what I'm thinking. So I'm thinking maybe that I don't know if 11-bit studios would even do this, but maybe they could have the system just generate maps based on. I mean, you could have a large map of the world, like a globe, that somebody would,
Or even just a simple regional one,
huh?
like a global map where you could just see, what things look like.
Yeah, and then like some pieces that would show where the land dreadnought went, and then what I
Yeah,
would,
like just you basically get a bunch of red lines showing you, where you've been. Then you could add in areas like
mm,
around mountains or ravines or anything, and just like shade them out, to show you can't go here.
yeah,
Also add in they could possibly add in like a fog of war of some sort, to show you where like grey out the area slightly if they
yeah.
wanted to,
I mean, if
or they could just put in a question mark, like oh we found something here if you want to go for it.
do you think that 11-bit studios should stop doing independent scenarios and just try and put all the content into the endless?
Hmm. No, I don't see a point. Don't see why they would do that.
Do you think they should remain separate?
I mean, there is some content you can get from Endless, but it does. There are a few questions it does answer, but a lot of them are all in the scenarios.
True. So, I
So
mean, go
the
on.
way I see it, it's more of Endless provides the where is it? Endless provides the side dish, while the scenarios are the main course in terms of lore.
There we go. There we go. So, I mean, I think if they wanted to, I was thinking that at least put all the content that you have tested in the scenarios into the endless. If it's possible, they could try and add those things in, because you can build a city from scratch with builders. Then after a while, maybe if you want to, instead of going all per faith and order, you decide to take the middle ground. After a while, a new tree opens up where you can use the two of them. or if you decide, you can decide to either use faith and order separately or try and combine the two of them based on what I've seen with TLA. Then after using the two of them, you get special buffs and unique buildings. And then they could even add in the labor laws after a while. When the city is fully developed, that would allow people to change their working hours and probably develop new jobs. So, after a while, when you get enough automatons, a large portion of the population isn't working. And I'm thinking if that's the case, then maybe what could happen is that those people could focus on other things related to a civilization that's fully developing. So there's so much things that they could do, exploring new regions, new resources that people could use. And as I say, it all depends on what these guys want to do, but they have a very rich.
There's a lot. Yeah, there is a lot they can do. Although speaking about, now you mention, faith and dreadnoughts and all that, I'm just picturing, just this land dreadnought just slowly going through the landscape, and all you can hear very, very faintly is just religious chanting, and you're just sitting there, and I'm just sitting there, just going, why am I picturing that?
Because maybe you're
why,
thinking,
why am I just seeing that?
I mean, maybe you could be thinking of a case where, like, the you have faith taking over, like faith keepers or a faith-based civilization that might have decided that they didn't want to actually settle in an area, and so they just stay in the land dreadnought and they travel around the region collecting
Oh, they're
resources.
turning into gypsies.
Yeah, or some crazy stuff like
Gypsies of
that.
the snow.
And it's like you see them in the Frostland, but and then strap it onto the land dreadnought, making it capable of plowing through the Frostland during the storm. In some limited capacity, it would move a lot slower because of the lack of visibility. I think my internet went off a while ago. You there?
Yes, I think you're doing an Australian.
So what are you saying now? What do you think about that?
Yes.
You think it can work?
Um. Oh, what was it?
I was saying that maybe the land dreadnought could have
Oh
like a
no, yeah, you were
floodgate.
talking about this might be one of your craziest ideas, and I replied back with, you obviously haven't met an animator.
So you think it? So could you animate that? I have no expertise in animation at all, man.
I mean, here's the thing: is that with animators, is that we come up with the weirdest things possible, and then we go, screw it, I'm gonna animate it.
I would love to see that animated.
As would I. I just need to do the models and decide everything.
That would be so cool. I have no idea how to
Oh no,
animate.
it'll just be funny when it's just got, like, you just hear a legend, it just screams past and just blaring Sabaton, or even from a distance, you just hear that very faintly.
I wonder if those things even had horns. Like, it made this weird sound when it's coming across the hills or something. And you say, oh, that's a freaking land dreadnought coming.
It'd be more of the what in God's bloody earth is that,
Because
and where did that sound come from?
that thing is fucking huge. Can you imagine seeing one of those things traveling?
Well, normally, especially the whistles on, like, the actual steam locos, is the actual pressure of the steam itself being used. Um,
That shit must have been.
Considering how much pressure is in that thing,
Ah,
I would probably say, uh, loud.
that would be loud enough for the entire fucking region to hear.
Loud enough for a couple of avalanches.
Never mind then. Never mind. I think I can do without
It's
that.
like, this is like, okay, what's this button? Oh, that's to turn off the engine. I don't know about that button. You don't touch that button. What does the
Don't
button
touch
do?
that.
Just don't touch
Don't
it.
touch it. If you want to live, don't touch that button. Cause
If you don't want us to be bogged under any circumstance, do not touch.
exactly. Cause I'm telling you, man, the, I
Uh,
don't. You know, the other thing that kind of is very intriguing is that when you go around, you
mm,
find radio station. How the fuck did they make radios?
yes.
Okay, how did they do that? How did they do that? I
Well,
don't know.
considering the term radio is thrown around fairly loosely,
It says radio tower.
um,
So I mean,
well, radio can basically be nearly anything, really.
uh,
Because technically, the telegram was considered a radio of some sort.
so are you saying that the telegram might not have actually been using an undersea and underground cable, and it might have been some form of single signal that they were transmitting above ground?
Well, by that point, radios were very, very experimental.
So
So, and
they
considering the fact that it's using a very large dish
they
in order
had
to transmit the radio frequencies, it is a good. There is a very high chance that there is some form of very primitive radio technology used.
they had steam cores. So let's amplify that primitive
Not only that,
technology.
the difference engine now, has completely and utterly failed.
Yeah, and it worked in there. So I mean, let's amplify that.
Anything's possible.
All right, there we go. Those dudes had technology to spare, so they could survive. And I mean,
It just works.
it just works. It well, we call it
The
plot
motto
armor.
of Winter Home.
Plot armor. It just works. You
Just don't question it. It just
just don't question it. You know, I mean, how is it that sea turtles? Yeah, I mean, these things don't make sense, but they make sense based on what the Lord says. I mean,
like sea turtles.
yeah, exactly. I'm just looking at it and
When and where?
nobody knows. We
When
just, we,
and where?
we just know
I thought
that,
everything was dead.
nope. Here comes the land dreadnought over the hill. That's the thing, man. A lot of the things that they developed, in the, let's see, a lot of the things that they created for the the um the game's lore and the content that they put into the game itself, it's kind of the word. It kind of some of it doesn't add up, and that's you know what's gonna be funny. A year from now, somebody's gonna come on to the Discord or the Reddit and say that it was meteors that caused the deep freeze, and the same conversation is going to happen all over again.
It's gonna happen perpetually. That's the thing. Until it's proven rock solid that yay or nay was that X and Y was responsible for this. It's gonna be like a broken record. It's gonna keep going and keep going and keep going.
And we're gonna have the same conversation. No, it was the Earth.
And the same wall we're gonna be headbutting.
Yep. And
Yeah, it's just gonna keep happening.
and the people in the
And yeah,
yeah, I mean, it's gonna keep going for years. I remember when I made the first video and I figured out, oh, it was the volcanoes. And you know how I figured out it was the volcanoes? There is an image somewhere of Frostpunk with the city and a volcano and the storm.
not even that they mention it.
Yeah,
It's one of the hints they mentioned two or three volcanoes erupting.
yeah, they did. I remember that.
And there's that, and there was a Turkish astronomer that said there was that a meteor comet came down, and yeah,
But the thing is about the meteor
I don't
and the
remember much.
uh, they said that there was a meteor shower. Well, you know what I think it was? I think maybe
Hmm?
the volcano, the eruption was so massive that it probably caused the meteors to actually come from to make it seem as if it's meteors coming from space. when it was actually just really volcanic rocks that somehow made
Well,
it
for
that
it
far.
to reach Europe, because they said it was around Europe area,
Yeah,
it might be Halley's Comet.
might be.
They probably thought, oh, that must be something crashing into the Earth. When it might have just been Halley's Comet.
It could be. I mean, anything is really possible right about now when it comes to the lore. But I think I'm gonna cut it short here, bro. So we'll talk again
Mm-mm.
maybe Sunday. All right. So take care, man.
Bloody good timing. The pot's whistling, so my second cup of tea's ready.
All right, later. Take care.
All right, later.
Yeah.
Take care, and it was a privilege.
Yeah. That was awesome. I gotta go now. Take care, guys.